who is a personal finance expert and founder of Fair Money. Good morning to you, Roger.
Good morning, David.
Always good to talk to you. I mean, honestly, when you look at the price of the goods in the supermarkets, how can butter be £5? People are really struggling.
It's amazing, except I do remember that a few months ago, butter was actually £9 for a while. It's just extraordinary how these prices are going on, and it looks like it's destined to get worse with even more pressure on everybody from more strikes. They've announced late yesterday that there will now be a series of strikes, some every day, to put quote maximum disruption on the British public, unquote. It's just unbelievable. One good bit of news I came across, of course, is that the British Army is running Heathrow and some other airports, and reports from passengers are that they'd like the border force to stay on strike because the Army are doing such a good job. The airport has never run so well and so efficiently. So, I mean, it gives a whole new meaning to the British Army term strike force, doesn't it?
Well, it certainly does. Of course, Border Force on strike again today, all the way up to the 31st, to cause maximum inconvenience. Just in terms of cost of living, I mean, we all know electricity bills are going through the roof. I was amazed at the price of my electricity. I had the family over for a few days, and obviously the house was busy and we had ovens on and all the rest of it. But, I mean, the cost of that for under a week was £100. So what do people do? How on earth do you trim your budget?
It's impossible to combat what's going on. I mean, I'm getting deluged with emails saying, Roger, you should be running things. You make common sense. What's wrong with the government? What's wrong with the opposition? Why don't you become a politician, et cetera, et cetera? Because both our government and the opposition are just, you know, apparently helpless to do something about these strikes. And one of the most appalling things that they just won't do something about is indeed, David, electricity. Now, 2/3 of your home energy bill is electricity. And 80% of that electricity has nothing whatsoever to do with gas. It comes from renewables, it comes from wind, from nuclear, from solar, etc. 80%, the National Grid announced a couple of weeks ago, today again, 80% of our electricity is being produced without anything to do with gas. And yet, because of conventions adopted during the 80s, if you can believe, when they nationalized the industries, the price of electricity in Great Britain is still pegged to the price of gas on the international markets. We are paying, I don't know, 10 times more than we should be for electricity. John Penrose, the MP who invented the price cap, which, by the way, he now says is not fit for purpose. Even Boris back in June. People have, Ofgem, the regulator, have been saying for years to various governments, decouple, uncouple electricity from gas, and you will save £60 billion.
So let me ask that question then. Why haven't we done that? I'm just looking at the real-time information. Our electricity, and you're right, 41% right now is coming from renewables. The majority of that is from wind. Of course, it's windy at the moment. And we have 26% from nuclear. So why don't we decouple? Because that would help people enormously. Their electricity bills would plunge.
I mean, as I say, Penrose, the MP, and many others keep talking to the government about this. You know, why does Keir Starmer think that he's actually going to get Labour votes from letting these strikes carry on? Does Rishi Sunak think that people don't know that the black hole of 55 billion was a myth and that he's doing nothing about electricity? I mean, we just have such terribly weak leadership that we're led into this dreadful, dreadful situation. The latest thing, I love this. Well, I don't really love it. I hate it, but David, yesterday they announced a new group called Strike Map. And Strike Map is, as it says, going to issue maps for where the various strikes are going on. And they are going to issue, I'm glad you're sitting, loyalty cards to union members who get points every time they show up at another strike or another picket. whoever it belongs to, whoever it is, even if it's got nothing to do with them. A good picture, yeah. I mean, they are going to get loyalty points. Now, apparently one Tory MP, an ex-Army chap, said, well, when they come out with the loyalty cards, I certainly hope the technology is the old punch card.
Yeah, I mean, just the thing that surprises me, and I'm very confused by, is you can't have flying pickets in this country. I was looking back. They're illegal. You can only join a picket line at your own workplace. And I just don't understand how this is going to be allowed, because this was under Thatcher that was stopped.
Yeah, absolutely. But I mean, they're not stopping anything. Nobody's doing anything. I mean, number one, what should have happened a long, long time ago, and I've been saying this for ages, and that's where all these emails saying, I should be running the country come from, is why didn't the government takes up to 80% of the price of a liter of petrol in tax and VAT. There's actually three taxes. There's fuel duty tax. There's then VAT on the fuel duty and on the tax. And then, of course, you pay for it with the pounds that you've already paid tax on through your salary. It's triple taxed. So why didn't they just reduce the tax take a bit for 6 months and give people
because
some
they want the
revenue?
Yeah,
exactly. And the same thing with the 55 billion pound supposed black hole, of which 30 billion, got shoved into Never Never Land the day after the tax increases were announced. They're just trying to build up a giant cash pile so that 18 months or less from now, they can turn around and say to us, wow, we've got all this money, and now we're going to cut taxes and so you can re-elect us.
So if I get this right, you're saying this is blatant electioneering. They are fiddling this so they can cut taxes, and then everyone thinks, oh, well, they're a nice bunch, and votes for them.
David, various think tanks and institutions announced at the time that Jeremy Hunt smugly and self-satisfiedly told us over and over again with his Project Fear sort of tactics that we were facing this desperate black hole of 55 million, we've got to fill it. And 24 hours after he made his budget speech, he said that 30 billion of that, which was going to be public service cuts, can be deferred for a couple of years. And these think tanks pointed out that had they not changed the figures, had they not changed the formulae, had they used the same public debt formula that Rishi used all the time he was Chancellor, we would actually have a 14 billion pound surplus, not a 55 billion pound deficit. So it is sickeningly blatant campaigning and electioneering at our expense. And at least if he could decouple the electricity, for goodness sake, I reckon that based on experts who I've spoken with, reckon that everybody's annual 3,000, whatever it is, subsidized or not, home energy bill would fall by 1,500 pounds immediately. And they have been told this for years, and yet they persistently do nothing.
And yet, it seems they're happy for elderly people particularly to suffer and be cold, and that will have massively adverse effects on their health. Let me just ask you this from Ray Mitchell. If our inept government lowered the tax and VAT on diesel, then the prices in supermarkets would fall, and so would inflation. Is that true?
Yes, of course, of course.
So if that is the case, why are they continuing down this path? And it goes on to say the trouble with net zero is they want to price us out of our cars. But then also we have another disconnect. So you want to go to EVs, but at the same time we don't have any energy infrastructure.
Well, wait a minute. It's now cheaper to drive a petrol car, David.
I know it is.
And now they're going to introduce a road tax on EVs, which they've been telling us to buy for all sorts of... I mean, there's no rhyme or reason. It's all about them and not about us. And it just makes me fume. It makes me froth. It makes me crazy. It's so obvious and blatant, and nobody does anything about it.
So just in terms of, I mean, have you got any tips for anyone? Because, I mean, I thought that the government's 30-second advert about energy and what you do and basically turn the boiler down was frankly patronising. And clearly what people need to do is to try and shop around, try and find the bargains. We've seen that people are deserting those convenience stores because they're far more expensive and going to cheaper supermarkets. And you're seeing people on good salaries doing this because people are struggling.
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of tips. I mean, the first thing is they should decouple electricity. The second thing is they should suspend some of the huge petrol tax that they're taking on both petrol and diesel. And then we should have a consumer minister. You know, if you Google all the ministers and secretaries of state and all the rest, you can find fisheries and economics and health and social, and you can't find the word consumer. And who is the biggest group of voters in the United Kingdom? Men? No. Women? No. Consumers. And yet there's no consumer minister. There's nobody whose job is simply to defend our interests. Everybody involved in consumer affairs has got some other job, some other vested interest. It's all about them, not about us. It's never ending. And now with this daily strike stuff and all the other liberties that they're taking, and I am sympathetic to the unions. This is not just about the unions. Why doesn't the government, with all the money they've got, especially from the fake £55 billion, why don't they just settle some of these things, pay some extra money? What they don't need to build up this huge war chest because nobody's going to vote for them anyway. So, you know, why don't they give the money to settle this and take their foot off the throat of the British public? What can you do? Number one, don't let it get you down, David. Don't let this drive you into a thing of despair. The biggest piece of advice I have from people that I talk to is people who are really down at the bottom and go without meals. They eating versus eating. They skip meals. For God's sake, don't do that. All you're going to do is demoralize yourself. Your kids are not going to understand. Do not skip a meal. Go to Morrison's. They have any supermarket chain like that. They have the most wonderful restaurants with healthy meals, very nicely decorated. The ambiance is lovely. The food is great, and it costs next to nothing.
But what happens if you have no money? If you literally have no money? I mean, clearly you need to rely on food banks, on charitable giving. You need to... I mean, the thing is, with energy companies, it's really important to talk to them.
Well, you can talk to them, but it's within the confines of the fact that they're overcharging you because they're pricing 2/3 of your energy bill on electricity related to the gas price, which, of course, by the way, I didn't mention earlier, is Mr. Putin is manipulating every day.
I know.
So if you have no money, yeah, you got to go rely on charity. You've got to rely on food. But fortunately, we have social services that, you know, that cover that very bottom end of the spectrum. But even there, you know, it's a couple of months ago, I reported on the fact that a food bank in Cwmbran in South Wales was broken into, David, one night. They left all the cash in the charity box. They just stole the food. Some people are very desperate. But
Roger.
what I'm saying is do what you have to do. Don't skip meals. Another thing to do is go to the bank, if you can find a branch somewhere, get some coins, and every time you save some money consciously, throw 10% of that into a jar, and when you've got enough, go out and treat yourself to something. Pull the plugs out of the wall for all the appliances you're not using at the time, because it does run up electricity costs.
Yep.
Go to the supermarket and try generic products instead of the brand ones. So,
for sure,
I'm not singling any. Sorry?
Yeah, no, I was just agreeing with you that is the case that, and I think many people are, is turning to the unbranded products, and they're just as good and they cost a fraction of the price.
And you can see that the lower cost supermarket chains like Lidl have started adding higher quality, higher value products because there's a whole new wave of shoppers coming there.
I'm sure that's right. Roger, I'm sorry I have to interject and cut you off. That's Dr Roger Gewolb, who's a personal finance expert and founder of Fair Money. It's really tough times, isn't it, for many, many people? And that was the point I was trying to make, is actually it's all very well saying, you know, shop wisely, but for many people, they have no money.
Oh, less and less and less, and people just cannot take the rising cost. They've got nowhere to move, and it does become a choice for some people between heating and eating. They are actually skipping meals.
And what is the government playing at here? Are they waiting for inflation to fall? Do you think it is blatant electioneering?
It could be. You know, he said a lot of different things which were interesting. He was saying, do they really need to build up a big war chest now? Is the priority that just put money back in people's pockets? Who is better at knowing how their money should be spent? Is it the government or is it us?
Well, quite. This one from Newsmonger says, Dr Roger Gewolb talks so much sense. I wish he was in the government. Thank you very much indeed for those. After the break, we'll take your calls, your thoughts and your messages. This is